You wired Claude code to OpenTelemetry, then Gemini CLI, then Codex. Same backend, same GenAI usage dashboard. Monday, the Claude panel looks healthy. Tuesday, Gemini looks empty. Wednesday, Codex doubles every token. Nobody changed the dashboard. The harnesses changed what they emit, again. You did not buy 3 observability products. You inherited 3 dialects of the same story. Tokens, tools, sessions, errors. Raw OTLP from a coding agent is not a finished contract. It is a moving source. Tonight, we put a collector in the middle as a semantic firewall. Normalize what backends can trust, park product extras under a custom namespace, scrub prompts by default, and stop blaming the chart when the schema drifted under you.
If you watched the connectors episode, you already treat the collector as a routing brain. If you watched tail sampling, you already treat it as a keepset brain. Same box, new signal class. Coding agents now speak OTLP, logs, metrics, sometimes traces, about models, tools, turns, and failures. Platform teams want one place to ask. How many tokens did we burn? Which tool failed? Which session blew up? That question dies when every harness invents its own field names and instrument types. You do not need a new vendor for this. You need the same collector skill you already use for apps. Receive on OTLP, transform with intent, export what the backend contract allows. The product under test tonight is not Claude or Gemini. It is the gateway that makes their telemetry comparable. Zoom into one session. An agent starts a turn. It picks a model, it calls tools, it burns input tokens, and sometimes cache read or cache creation tokens that never show up if you only sum the naive field. It may emit time to first chunk. It may emit an API error that is not a runtime exception. Different CLIs enable logs, metrics, and traces on different defaults. Codex may leave logs off and point metrics somewhere else until you set all 3 exporters. Gemini may give you an installation ID that is not an email. Claude may put content-bearing fields you should never index. The shared idea is simple. Harness telemetry is product telemetry wearing OpenTelemetry clothes. Read the clothes. Do not assume every button is GenAI semantic conventions finished. Point 3 harnesses straight at your vendor, and 4 failure modes show up fast. 1. Schema drift. A field renames and your panel flatlines while traffic is fine. 2. Wrong instrument type. A standard GenAI name expects a histogram. An additive counter sneaks in under the same name and your backend lies about distributions. 3. Incomplete totals. Cache tokens missing from input means finance and capacity both undercount. 4. Privacy. Prompt text, tool arguments, and local paths land in attributes. You wanted usage. You indexed secrets. None of that is OpenTelemetry is broken. That is, you skipped the contract layer. Apps already taught us this with metrics cardinality. Coding agents are teaching it again with GenAI fields that move every release. Here is the shape that survives. Harnesses export OTLP to a local or gateway collector, commonly gRPC on 4317. The collector normalizes. The backend only sees a documented contract. Think semantic firewall, not pretty middleware. Source dialects stay behind transforms. Unrelated telemetry on the same receiver is not stamped or renamed by accident. If a mapping cannot land cleanly, prefer fail open survivors you can query, raw keys still present, over silent deletes that make drift look like a dead pipeline. Your job in the war room becomes, is the mapping stale or is nothing arriving? That is a different runbook than restart the agent. Pin the semantic convention revision you claim to implement. A moving branch name is not a compatibility contract. This is the teaching beat. Do not overload a standard name with a different instrument type. Canonical GenAI stays under gen_AI. Native histograms, inference detail style events, operation and model attributes when the semantics match. Product and coding analytics that do not fit that instrument get a versioned custom namespace. Call it agentic or whatever your team owns, for additive usage counters, lifecycle events, and harness-specific metrics. Example, GenAI client token usage remains a histogram. Additive token counters become a custom sum with an explicit relationship attribute so you know total versus subset. Codex turn-level histograms are not the same thing as a single model operation. Preserve the boundary instead of relabeling them into a lie. 2 contracts, 1 gateway. Dashboards stop arguing with the source of truth.
Default scrub prompts, tool arguments, and known local path fields from logs, spans, and span events. You can debug agents without storing the novel they typed into the chat. API failures are not runtime exceptions. Classify them as API errors with a low cardinality error type. Do not fabricate exception type just to light up an exceptions panel. Preserve genuine exception events only when a real exception type exists. Identity is another trap. Missing user email should stay missing. Do not invent unknown. Header-based identity overrides are attribution, not authentication. Keep them on loopback or behind a trusted edge that strips client lies. If your metrics include session ID and user email on every series, cardinality will teach you humility. Prefer session detail in logs and traces. Keep team-level metrics low cardinality.
Here is the gateway shape you can ship tonight. We build the YAML in 4 passes. First, receivers. Start with OTLP on loopback. Port 4317 for gRPC and 4318 if you also expose HTTP. Keep it on loopback until you put auth in front. Processors next, in this order. Memory limiter first. Size limit MIB for real capacity, not a laptop demo. Then transform normalize. That is your dialect mapping into GenAI and your custom analytics namespace. Then filter scrub. Prompts, tool args, local paths cut here. Then batch. Exporters. While you learn, use debug, or a local JSON-L file if you want to inspect payloads. When you cannot afford loss in an outage, send OTLP to your backend with sending queue enabled. Learn path first, durable path second. Under service pipelines, wire logs, metrics, and traces on purpose. Harnesses disagree on which signals are on by default, so do not assume one pipeline covers you. One more footgun. Collector multi-file merges replace lists wholesale, so an exporter overlay must restate the full exporter list. Pair memory_limiter with a sane process memory limit. Same gateway discipline as microservices, now pointed at agents. Harness schemas change faster than mappings. When a token panel dies, do not start with a restart lottery. First, query what already landed. Look for drift signatures, agentic events missing expected GenAI usage fields, raw source keys like input tokens still sitting on normalized records, token points without a relationship attribute. Survivors mean the source still sends, and your mapping is stale. Nothing arriving means pipeline or exporter. Second, check collector logs for OTTL statement errors. That is a defect, not quiet drift. Third, only if you must, enable a raw pre-transform tap to local JSON-L. That tap is unscrubbed, prompts and paths included. Local debugging only. Delete after triage. Never ship it to a production index. Fail open mapping turns drift into evidence. Silent deletes turn drift into a ghost story. Lock 4 actions before you close the tab. 1. Pick a single harness on loopback OTLP. Prove logs, metrics, and traces actually export. 2. Write the 2-contract rule in the PR. GenAI keeps standard instruments. Custom namespace owns additive analytics. 3. Scrub prompts and paths by default. Refuse fabricated exceptions. 4. Document the drift runbook, survivors versus dead pipeline, so on-call does not blame the agent UI. Start with the debug exporter, then file or OTLP to your backend, then a low cardinality metrics profile if user and session dimensions explode. Claude, Gemini, and Codex will keep changing field names. Your gateway contract is what you own. If OpenTelemetry 101 was the mental model and tail sampling was the keep set for traces, this is the keep set for agent telemetry. Ship the YAML, verify one session end-to-end. If you're fighting empty token panels, double-counted usage, or prompt text leaking into your backend, like this so the next person searching finds it. Share it with a teammate who owns the collector. Subscribe if you want more collector keep set work like this, and drop a comment with which harness broke your dashboard first, Claude, Gemini, or Codex, and what field renamed on you.